Hello, hello again. So now I'm really excited because I have a panel full of ladies, but it's still very diversity panel because they are totally coming from a different angle, different countries, different aspects. So everyone, please allow me to welcome Katherine, Milligan, Vanessa, Erogbogbo, and Jugnu Pati, which they are three amazing ladies that we just recently meet. Again, COVID-19 brought us a great people into our life, although they are far away, but very, very close. Hi, ladies. Super, super happy to see you. And finally, also see your faces. I think we didn't do it before. I would like to give you the stage and please introduce yourself here. We do have enough time, and I want to give you enough time to present what are you doing today and actually why you came to this place with what you're doing today, with your mission. Please, Katherine, start.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. And there is a little background noise. I'm sorry about that. Thank you so much for having us. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. By way of introduction, I just want to say, I've been passionate about development and equality all my life, and I'm equally passionate about market-based entrepreneurial solutions to social and environmental problems. And over the past decade, I have mentored, coached, advised, and supported, leading founders and entrepreneurs in their journey to impact. And it's an enormous privilege in my life to be a part of that journey. Now, by introduction to this topic, without preempting my fabulous co-panelists here, let me just say this: raising investment is a huge pain point, for most entrepreneurs, but for the female entrepreneurs I've gotten to know over the years, it is, almost universally an uphill battle. And, they've anecdotally relayed their struggles to me over the years. And now, these have been writ large, right? In the famous study published in Harvard Business Review in 2017. Some of you may be familiar with it, but if you haven't read it, you should. It's titled, "We Recorded VC's Conversations and Analyzed How Differently They Talk About Female Entrepreneurs." And the irony is, this is not even what the researchers set out to do. Their initial aim was to study financial discourse, but as they started, and decision-making, but as they started processing data, the gendered aspect of the discourse just became so obvious they couldn't, sort of leave it to the side. And you can guess where I'm going with this, right? So venture capitalists tend to question women's credibility, trustworthiness, experience, and knowledge, whereas they commonly refer to and describe male entrepreneurs as assertive, innovative, competent, experienced, and knowledgeable. They say things like, the male entrepreneur was young and promising, but the female entrepreneur was young and inexperienced. The male was cautious and sensible, but the female was too cautious, and she doesn't take risks. Now, the thing is about this, words really matter, because in the European country where the researchers performed this study, about 1/3 of businesses are owned and run by women, but those women-owned businesses only receive about 15% of funding. Would anyone like to guess what country this is? This is not a name and shame exercise, far from it. Sweden. And this is not to call out Sweden. Rather, it is to say, if these unconscious biases lead to this kind of gendered discourse and those funding outcomes in as egalitarian and progressive a society as Sweden, then, we know that this is truly a global problem, and we have to wrestle with it because, this is 2020, for God's sake, we got to get a move on here, and we have to hold ourselves accountable to do better. And most importantly, we're leaving value on the table. So that's why, I'm passionate about the discussion today. And thank you, Molly, so much for having us.
Thank you so much. And we see behind you the bamboo logo. So, before you, we had Florian. So I think people will understand what are you talking about right now, because we talked a lot about bamboo and the SDG 500 before. Jugnu, maybe you will start.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mali and Katherine, for laying the context of our discussion today. Hi, everyone. I'm Jugnu. I'm Senior Investment Manager with Bamboo Capital. Spent a little more than a decade working and investing in emerging markets in Asia. I think the journey for me, at least, has not been without its bumps, but I don't think I know any woman who hasn't. Just to put some numbers on the table, I think the ratio from classrooms to office spaces to boardrooms has only worsened. So if there were like 30% women, in my class, there were only 15% when I moved into financial services. And right now, out of every 20 boardrooms I enter, almost 19 of them are all male. And if you look at the women who are pitching today, if I come across one woman who is pitching for a business idea, there are 100 men. So I think the ratios are just too enormous to ignore. And if we don't do something about it today, then I don't know when. So I think the time is now, and the differences are too stark to ignore. And if we just look at it from a business perspective, a lot of these female-run businesses, companies which have a very strong gender equality agenda, have been proven to be quite successful and to deliver a shareholder value. So it's something which is a win-win for all, and hence we should look at it very seriously.
Thank you so much. Vanessa, we would like to hear from you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Fantastic to be here with you this morning. So I'm the Chief of the Sustainable and Inclusive Value Chain section at the International Trade Center, and also the head of the She Trades Initiative. For those of you who don't know who ITC is, we are the Geneva-based, and I will tell you, Geneva is probably the city in the world that has the highest prevalence of roadworks. So you will hear, despite all my best efforts, roadworks happening outside my window. Forgive me for that. So we're based in Geneva. We're a joint agency of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization, and our job is to help SMEs to internationalize. So I studied civil engineering. I did my MBA at London Business School. I have a 20-year record of working on private sector development issues across the world. I started my career in banking, in commercial banking at Standard Chartered, and then moved on to development finance and now into trade. So really, having lived and traveled to so many countries all my life since I was very small, I've been struck by two things. First, the incredibly paradoxical world that we live in. On the one hand, where there's so much, and on the other, so little. And secondly, the enormous role that markets have to play and that economic activity has to play in shaping our reality, from the quality of our education and healthcare to the sense of society and values, whether that's for the good or the bad. And this is really what's driven my purpose in life, and this is what's driven me to work in places where I can use markets to build a better world. And to get to that better world, we need women. I want to leave you with three things that I think should give you pause for thought. The first one is, and some of you may have heard this statistic, I don't want to use too many numbers, but the first one is from McKinsey a few years ago, that if women were to participate equally in the workforce as men, that could add $28 trillion to global GDP. And in this post-COVID scenario, that promoting gender equality in response to the crisis could add $13 trillion to global GDP by 2030, compared to a gender regressive scenario. The second thing that I'd like to leave with you is that on entrepreneurship and trade, women still lag behind their male counterparts due to multidimensional challenges. And Katherine has given some good statistics around that. And the third and final thing that I'd like to leave you with is that gender inequality is written into the law even today in 2020. According to the World Bank's Women, Business and the Law publication, only 8 out of 190 countries covered in that report scored 100%. And so at She Trades, in aiming to connect 3 million women to market by 2021, we find that access to finance remains their single biggest obstacle. And this brings me full circle to where I began my career.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And coming back to something you mentioned, Vanessa, you know, when we are talking about female investor, you know, as I mentioned before, I want this panel to be kind of like round table with 4 ladies that sitting with a good coffee or a great wine and talking about the obstacles. You know, what made us so passionate and fighting to become an investor? What mission do we have in a personal level before the business level even? Because, you know, we can always work for someone and make a lot of money. But we do have something from the inside, burning from the inside. This is something I see in every, you know, woman that became an investor and go without saying, raised her own fund with her own partners and so on. So, you know, we are talking today from a conference that it's AsiaBerlin Summit. AsiaBerlin is actually bridging Berlin, Germany with Asia market, but of course also emerging market. We talked before also what's happening in Africa, which is very relevant. Things are evolving and coming back to Europe, coming back to Germany as a very good success stories. Of course, this will take time. So I want to address back and facing the fact that in Germany, we do not have fund of fund that's raised by women, and we do not have venture capital that was raised by women, funded by women. So I would like to ask you, because you're in a different location and different background, how do you observe this situation? How we actually make our pool bigger and attract much more ladies in a global level to join the mission of being much more female investor, you know, around? Katherine, please.
Sure, I can get us started. That's a big question and, you know, sort of problem to solve. But I'd love to sketch out, you know, sort of the opportunities as I see them and the challenges as you pointed out. I think, you know, look, not only is gender equality a moral and a social imperative, you know, that impacts half the world's population, productivity and GDP growth, it's also a source of competitive advantage. You know, I mean, women's entrepreneurship is a significant contributor to economic stability. It's a source of innovation and business strength. And this is underscored by the, you know, kind of UN Global Compact and Gallup study, which found that companies with diverse workforces are 22% more productive, have 27% higher profitability, and 39% higher customer satisfaction. So, I mean, I think part of the answer to your question is letting data, right, and evidence sort of formulate that business case. And, you know, likewise, a 2019 analysis by McKinsey found that the top quartile of gender diverse executive teams were 25% more likely to have above average profitability. So in a way, it's not just, you know, the moral thing to do or the good thing to do. it is also, you know, kind of good business. It is, now, in Asia, you talked about, you know, the different sort of region that we're in, where we're focusing our gender lens investment fund is in South and Southeast Asia. And what we see there is that the number of vehicles is growing. So, you know, according to, and this is a great resource, you know, the Gender Lens Investing Landscape Report that was published just 2 months ago by Catalyst at Large and Sasakawa Peace Foundation, gender lens investing vehicles have increased to a total of 7.7 billion assets under management across both public and private markets globally, which is a 60% increase over just 2 years. And in Asia specifically, gender lens funds have raised 1.3 billion. Now, the challenges, precisely as you just said, you know, while women's entrepreneurship is rising, access to capital remains stubbornly low. I believe part of the reason for that is that progress on gender diversity in the investment industry is painfully slow. 4% of leadership positions in the investment management industry are women. 3.4% of private equity assets are managed by women. 1.5% of assets under management in hedge funds are managed by women, and 2% in mutual funds are, managed by female fund managers. So your question is, how do we, bring more women into this? I think what I'm trying to say is, what are the ripple effects of that? What does that actually, sort of mean in terms of supporting, scaling, providing access to capital for female entrepreneurs? And I just, want to link back to my remarks in the study about Sweden, kind of in the first round of discussion that we made. We don't need to look any further than that to extrapolate what it means, right? Investors, like all humans, like all of us, are prone to unconscious biases, and in many cases are unable to understand the need and the growth potential for some products and services targeted primarily at women customers. So again, we're leaving a huge amount of value on the table. I think, how we make that case, is perhaps the second part of the answer to your question, but the numbers are dismal, and we have to do better.
We have to do better. Amazing. Jugnu, please join us.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Katherine in terms of what we are seeing in Asia as well. There's a general sort of perception that most women are risk averse, especially as investors. And hence the reason that you would find very few women investors in VC or in PE firms. And I think that sort of bias also percolates down to investments into entities which either have a very strong female focus or are led by female entrepreneurs. So I think that's something which has been there to a large extent. We've seen that across markets in Asia. Of course, of late, there has been a change, at least. If I were to look 5 years back, I think there would be just 1 or 2 funds which would be actively looking to invest with a strong gender thesis. Today, you have multiple other funds which are doing that, and they're also expanding the sort of gender definition into what kind of investments they want to make, right? So it's going beyond female entrepreneurs. It's trying to look at all sorts of women beneficiaries. And I think that's a change which is positive. And it's also been driven to a certain extent from the LPs. So we are seeing at least the next generation of LPs in wealthy family offices. The new generation, the young generation wants change to happen, and they are also incentivizing GPs, or they are saying that this is something that we want to see a change in. We want more leadership positions or more investors to be working, female investors to be working in funds. We want more money to be channelized towards investments which is benefiting women directly. And I think they are seeing the business case in it. They're seeing the impact case in it. And that's also, I think, driving to a large extent an increase in the number of funds which are operating in Asia today, which is actively looking at gender. And I think mainstreaming of gender for a lot of commercial investments as well. Like today, you see, I wouldn't take names, but very large funds, who are consciously looking at mainstreaming gender into their existing investments because they feel that the market at large is looking at them.
Absolutely. Losing business opportunities, we said. Absolutely. Agree with you. Vanessa.
Well, I think both Katherine and Jugnu have done a very good job of capturing a lot of how and why we don't see as many female investors. But I wanted to zoom in really more on the opportunity that we see in Asia and the reason that we have established this fund to invest in businesses in Asia, if that's okay with you. And, first of all, this is because there are many, many businesses creating many, many jobs in South Asia and Southeast Asia. In that region, and to give you a sense of the type of businesses and opportunities there in that region, SMEs, small and medium-sized companies account for 96 of those businesses. In addition, the access to finance constraint is significant and growing in this region, particularly currently in this COVID pandemic crisis. And the shortfall from the research that we and many others in the ecosystem have undertaken is greatest for growth stage SMEs, so, and especially those managed and controlled by women. Also, looking at the gap even closer, this actually really surprised me, because I thought that we would find that the largest need would be in Africa. But recent research showed that over half of the global finance gap for SMEs is in Asia, and that really underscored for us that the region in terms of need is really greatest. And then in terms of the opportunity, from an investor perspective, really stable, over the long period macro indicators, and as I've said, a huge pipeline of potential investee companies.
Fantastic. I want to ask you, Vanessa, because you are very good with numbers, you know, in the International Trade Center, and actually it's a very important thing, because we can talk very emotionally, you know, I have a daughter, I want her to have more opportunities, I want her to dream big, but, you know, let's stick to the numbers. What can you share with us about the outperforming numbers or statistic when it comes to female founder, or of course, female in the founding team?
Sorry, could you say the last bit again?
Yes, when it comes to female founder, female CEOs, or as a female part of the founding team.
What is their performance, you say?
Yes, what can you share with us about the outperforming? You know, we always said that when it's a woman, when it's diversity team, I mean, there are very significant investors online and offline today listening to us, and I would love you to share some about this.
Well, I think what I'd like to point to is this issue of diversity. And diversity is, I think, the main point, not just to have only female founders, but to have really diverse teams that include women in positions of decision making and control. And so when we look at the return on investment, there are a number of studies that have been done. Most of these studies have, most of the big studies have been done either on the FTSE 100 index, or, you know, some of the other big indices, but they clearly show a significantly higher return on investment in firms where there are females on the board or in leadership positions. I don't have those figures off the top of my head for Asia and for smaller and medium enterprises, but we see in terms of the performance of these companies with increased investment and market linkages, access to opportunities, then we see that these companies have typically grown, expanded to more diverse markets, and employed more people. This is a bit what we see in terms of female SMEs. But perhaps my colleague Katherine has some data on.
Sure, I'd be happy to jump in on that. And Jugnu, I know that you've got some powerful examples as well. I mean, not to repeat myself, but just to reiterate some of the figures that I cited previously to Vanessa's point about diverse teams, is the UN Global Compact study that found companies with diverse workforces are 22% more productive, had 27% higher profitability, and 39% higher customer satisfaction. And it's very recently, last year, the McKinsey study came out that found that those gender diverse executive teams in the top quartile, so of diversity, on the metric of diversity, were 25% more likely to have above average profitability. And the most diverse companies were 36% more profitable than the least diverse. There's other data I am familiar with from PitchBook and from Mass Challenge that sort of have found, this is recently, it came out in 2018, female founders raise less capital but generate more revenue. And I understand that this isn't necessarily a regional deep dive on Asia. There were 350 companies included in this study, however, and sort of the male companies generated at the time of investment around 660,000, whereas the female led companies were already generating more than 730,000 in revenue. And you see, it does not at all correlate to the amount of investment they're able to raise. So the women, in contrast, raise under $1 million on average, whereas the men raise 2.1 million on average, while generating less revenue. So I think that, is a testament to just how unequal the playing field is.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this. Valuable.
I think just to add on to what Katherine was mentioning, and I'd like to give probably two examples from different parts of Asia, one in Vietnam and one in India. So there was this one Vietnamese company which is operating in the financing space, which has around 10x the loan book of another Singapore-based company, where the leadership team is largely male. And if you look just at the business parameters of both and the kind of money and valuations at which they have raised it, there's a 100 million valuation for the company, which is a Singapore-based entity led by all male team, compared to 1/3 valuation for the female-led company. And again, if you just look at the business model, this company is the one which is providing financial services to much more smaller female entrepreneurs as well. So the multiplying effect is significantly higher than what you would see for the other company. But you could see that sort of numbers play out. It's 1/3 the valuation for 10x the sort of business volumes. I think if I were to invest today in company A versus B, I think I would definitely make more money investing in the Vietnamese company. Another example, which is for one of our other investors in the education space, they're currently tracking 5x returns for a company in the education space where, it's largely the leadership team constitutes women. It's led by a female entrepreneur as well, and they are now expanding into other markets of Southeast Asia, and it's the company which is tracking the highest returns for that investor amongst their other portfolio companies. So I think if we were to talk about numbers, I'm sure there are enough and more examples to showcase to investors that, yes, this makes business sense. And this is something where there is a great need for investment. There's not enough capital which is being allocated.
Amazing.
Can I
yes.
just, one last thing,
Please.
Jugnu, you kind of catalyzed a thought. Why... I don't think it's the evidence and the numbers that's required, because we give the evidence, we give the numbers, we give the figures, we give the proof, but still it doesn't happen. So, I appreciate that there are lots of investors listening in, wanting to hear the numbers, but these numbers are available, widely available. So what is it that we need to what nail do we hit to unlock the capital? And it's not a case of not enough data, not enough evidence and proof.
I think that's a very hard one. That's a very hard one to answer, and I think that's true across the board. It's known that women have to work like twice as hard, generate twice as much, sort of demonstrate as much returns or revenue and or proof to be able to generate half the sort of capital. I think for the LPs, it's a point that they need to act today. Do they want to take advantage, I would say, of the situation today where there aren't enough people who are chasing a very successful female entrepreneur, or do you want to wait 10 years and, when the company is 20x and invest then? I think the onus is on the investors today. I would say if you really want, a bang for the buck, you should take actionable steps today. And I think that it's largely, there's a lot of bias, right? So we have to consciously be aware of the bias and remove it if we have to, look at this. And it's not enough to just speak about it. I think people need to put the money in, and that basically then says that yes, we want to do something and change for the better.
So you see what's happening with 3 passionate women on the same table. It's like, even as a moderator, you need to push this step in. I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. And this is exactly the message I want to come all the way to Berlin, that we are not in our own crazy bubble of women that are investing, not necessarily only women, but mainly on diversity. It's because it's not a social thing, it's a business thing. This is where exactly the let's say the good guys, the LPs, are stepping in. And thank God it's a positive movement. But I want to show that this is not on our although global, but women investor bubble. It's, in the 15 minutes, actually, I have a panel with the European Commission. Yesterday, we launched the Horizon 2030. Suddenly, every single person, highest level that they will be, from the commissioner and lower, they are talking about the importance of the diversity. As a Europe, we are diversity market already, but to put a lot of attention for the female founder. There is a upcoming, I would say, application that will put a focus on this. This is actually the first time it's happening. So one of the discussion that is coming from the European Commission, and this is, I would say, my part in the upcoming discussion, is it on us, the female ladies investors, I don't like to say female investors, but is it on us to make sure that we have the capital, we have the great LPs, the family officers, the public sector, the private sector, and to deploy much more money into diverse team, into female founders, female CEO as well. This is one of the discussion right now in the European Commission. How actually, is it a metric, is it a smart, I would say, tool for them to deploy these billions and to make sure that they will eventually get to the right place that they want them to get? What do you think about that?
Well, listen, kudos to you and the organizers, for elevating the issue of diversity, to such a high level discourse, with the European Commission and other decision makers on the continent. I think, I can only second what Jugnu has already said, which is, we really need to put our money where our mouth is. And I do think that most of the donor governments, Europe here is really leading the way, particularly with the 2X challenge to channel much more development finance into women. I think, that holds enormous promise and potential. But, from where I sit and from conversations I'm having, it also feels, that deployment, isn't necessarily, as speedy or as scaling as rapidly as, kind of the hope, was at the beginning when this initiative was conceived and launched. But it's so important that they collectively, come together, stand behind the issue of channeling much more capital into women, and particularly that they meaning, the donor finance community, are actively looking for co-investment opportunities together. And one of the things, sort of, Mali, that we talked about previously and that you touched on as well is, sort of the message to, kind of that audience and others, other investors in the audience, sort of LPs and family offices and others, really who might be, let's say, unfamiliar with impact investing and not, sort of terribly clear about, what's in it for them, or, sort of why is this a strategy worth exploring, kind of what message will we deliver. And I just wanted to offer a very simple message. I think, everyone is talking now about how there's no going back, that we need a new normal, that, stakeholder capitalism must be that new norm, that we have to move to net positive and, adopt, climate, resilient strategies urgently. My message is, this is not just for the, to put sort of that pressure and that, normative framework on the multinationals and corporate behemoths, right? This has to become the new norm for how business is done, including for startups and SMEs, and not just in Europe, but in Asia and also globally. So, this is a historic opportunity to use investment through, impact investment funds and vehicles as a tool to shift market behavior, to move capital to the funds and firms that demonstrate a commitment to gender equality, to invest in women as a source of innovation and impact. And I think really there is some assumptions, or sort of some again, unconscious bias that you can either have women's economic empowerment or you can generate an attractive financial return. These are not opposing goals. You can achieve both at once with a carefully crafted investment thesis and a really seasoned sort of team, as we have with us today. And most importantly, this is a historic opportunity to instill new norms and practices around gender equality and worker protection, safe workplaces, anti-discriminatory policies, sexual harassment sort of policies. This is, sort of the moment to create that new normal. So that would be, sort of my message to the investors in the room to join us on that journey.
Fantastic, Katherine. I just want to make some note here, like super short one, that I don't want people to understand that when you invest in a female founder, it's actually an impact, just not to mix that. This is exactly like you mentioned. When you do it, you probably help the society. You are missing less business opportunities, but let's not put the gender related immediately in impact, because we heard yesterday in one panel that some LPs really kind of like tend to go away from this. Jugnu, would you like to step in?
I'm not Jugnu, but since she's taking a minute to switch on her microphone,
Yes,
Vanessa here. When you mention the discussion with the European Commission, it made me reflect a little bit on where I see or the experiences that we've had in sort of the development nexus. I think we're really at a crossroads. So we see that the development community tends to have worked in silos, especially when you look at the way in which development finance has been used and the way traditional sources of overseas development assistance have been used. And I think that we're at a crossroads where to make these funds most effective, we really need to bring those two communities together and go beyond the traditional uses of overseas development assistance into more innovation, get these stakeholders more comfortable with working more with private investors, with working more with the development finance arms of their organizations to really unlock that capital and to really achieve the goals that they'd like to achieve on gender equality. Because, no amount of goals will achieve those results unless they are, profitable. That's a fact. It has to be profitable.
Very important topic. Thank you so much. Jugnu, can you share with us?
Sure. I think as probably you were mentioning earlier, some of the funds which initially started, the thought process was that because a lot of female entrepreneurs are not getting access to capital, maybe that's the way to go. But I think over a period of time, that people have evolved in terms of what sort of ideas they're looking at. And we want to broad base that sort of definition. It's not just looking at, one individual in an organization. I think it's more to do with what is the sort of scale effect that you're having on a much larger populace, right? So are you looking at a significant number of female employees who are benefiting because of the investment that you're doing in the company? Or, women in supply chains, I think Vanessa has spoken about that quite a lot. A lot of women in trade don't get that sort of support. Most of them are not even like permanent employees, right? So they're not getting the benefits of practices and policies that these organizations have in place. And same goes for female customers. You have a lot of very successful sort of companies which are targeting women consumers, but then again don't really listen to what women want, and really are trying to force fit their sort of products or financial services on them. And that's something that we want to change. And we want to broad base that definition, and obviously we want a lot of women to be in leadership positions. If it's led by a women entrepreneur, I think that's a big plus. But we want to expand that scope, because some of the investors do feel that maybe we are, in funds which are focusing very narrowly on one sort of narrative might miss out on the larger picture. So that's something also that we are seeing, at least largely in Asia now.
Can I pick up on that?
Please.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, I guess link that, right, to our sort of title for today, right? From gender lens to gender justice. I think Jugnu really summarized it brilliantly. If I were to kind of put a shorthand around this, I would say, if gender lens investing 1.0, right, was focused on sort of the female as the founder, and that was the key metric, which I agree is too narrow. We're now moving into, gender lens investing, 2.0, 3.0, okay, where, again, going back to, sort of the cri de coeur today for stakeholder capitalism, where we meaning in this, partnership between CARE, ITC, and Bamboo, but we also, that broader field of professionals in gender lens investing are looking at all of the female stakeholders in the company's ecosystem, right? And thinking about broader and deeper impact. It's not just, the number of female founders or the number of women in jobs. It is also things like the pay gap. It is also things like, is there a safe workforce, or is sexual harassment rampant? And as Jugnu mentioned, it is also about, the products and services themselves, and, kind of how or whether, they improve female customers' prosperity and provide opportunity to women in the supply chain, right? So I just wanted to underscore that, Molly, because you raised it, and I think it is important, that we clarify that we are absolutely moving, kind of beyond that more narrow focus. And I also thought it'd be helpful just to offer a few high-level principles, right, of the thought process that we've gone on in terms of our investment strategy, but that may also have broader application. The first is, and we've touched on this already a couple of times, but again, just to emphasize, as investors, we believe it is our responsibility to address unconscious bias in our investee companies. It sets the tone and the culture within the business and is reflected in the formal systems and the informal practices in the company. Second, it is critical to incorporate, as Jugnu mentioned, the leadership and the feedback of women into the company's decisions. A business that can tap into the wisdom of its diverse employees, customers, and suppliers will lead to a stronger company. And, we cited that, sort of the Gallup and the McKinsey studies to that effect. And third, and this is important because I am particularly, sort of proud of this, we are walking the talk. we're linking our carried interest to the achievement not only of the financial results of our fund, but also to our gender impact goals. And we're backing that up with a quantifiable, clear set of metrics that will keep us focused on the impact throughout our investment process and hold us accountable to achieve that systemic change we are setting out to accomplish.
Sorry for jumping in. We have one question that it's quite clear, but I want to address that so the audience online will kind of like listen to your quick answer. Do you invest in companies operating in clean tech, energy, efficiency space in India? Vanessa and Jugnu, thanks. This is a question from the audience online. So maybe, Jugnu, would you like to step in? We have 30 seconds, so do it as soon as possible. And by the way, if you would like to approach each one of them, each one of us directly, you know, our LinkedIn is always open.
Sure. So I think in terms of sectors, the fund that the CareShe Trades Impact Fund does focus to a large extent, you know, it's one of the key sectors for us: renewable energy, clean energy, you know, wastewater management, the essential services, so to speak. I think A, it's important in this COVID environment, and B, we think that the local demand drivers for that have been going quite strong, you know, and we've seen that sort of demonstrable effect in companies. You know, their businesses have actually in certain areas grown, at least in terms of demand. So that's an area that we do invest in. Because the fund is currently focused largely on Southeast Asia, India is not a market that this fund is currently focusing on, but yeah, hopefully sometime in future.
Thank you so much. We out of time. We can speak forever. And thank you for the great audience that we have here and online. The message is out there for sure. And from my point of view, I really appreciate your time, your engagement, you're talented. And it all starts and begin and end with the role models, which each one of you are very big role models. Thank you so much and hope to see you in person very, very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.